All right, it's January the 30th, so take note of the date. I'd like to talk about what's been happening in Egypt, and I'd like to talk about, obviously, the reoccurrence of Sharia law in Whitechapel, although that really hasn't got anything to do with what's happening in Egypt. I think that I usually talk about things that happen over here, and I'm not concerned with anywhere else, which is usually true, but I think that the Egyptian thing has great ramifications, not only for the Mediterranean and Europe, but the whole world, and it shows a revolution unfolding, a revolution that is continuing, and a revolution that we've got no input into really here in this country, but something that we should be watched very carefully because it may have an indication of our future. I'm not going to bother to go into how the whole thing started and so on. We all know because we all watch the television, and most of my information is gleaned from what I see on the television, particularly Al Jazeera, Russia Today, the Sky News and BBC. That's about my main source of visual information, plus the newspapers. None of this has been culled from the internet, as I don't go on the internet except when I'm speaking on it like now. I'm looking back particularly at last weekend and what has happened and how the forces have consolidated. Morsi won the election by fair means or foul, but he did win the election. He did become the president and or prime minister or whatever he is, and he has enacted draconian powers unto himself. So therefore, this has sparked off the latest round of protests and riots and so on. But these aren't protests as we understand them here, where you march from point A to point B. This is in fact an uprising of the people, an uprising in the major urban and industrial centres of Egypt. This is Cairo, Alexandria, and a lot of Port Suez, Point Said, and Islamia. This is where these things are happening. And it has taken on two things. First of all, it's taken on an uprising, not only against the police, who are the same police that there was when Mubarak was in power. They haven't been replaced. It's the police force. Against the police, but also against the government. Now, the government, they're saying that they want Morsi to step down. They don't want any dialogue. They want him to step down. Before they were objecting to the powers he'd given himself, but now they say they want him to step down. They're not proposing any alternatives. They just want to get rid of him, which I think is positive enough in itself. And they're also saying that they do not want to see the imposition of any Sharia law. So you've got the minorities, which include Coptic Christians, but also the alienated, unemployed youth, trade unionists, people with jobs, real workers in factories and so on, in Port Said and so on, and they're generally disaffected and they're generally alarmed. They don't want Egypt to go the way that Iran done and ended up with basically an Islamic dictatorship. They say we haven't swapped one dictatorship for another, and they're out on the streets proving that they mean what they're saying. There's been many fatalities. So I'd just like to talk about what's been happening in the last week and various other things that have arisen from it. Well, we've seen there's about 50 plus people dead in the streets. Martial law has basically been declared, although it's been called a curfew. They're talking about martial law. That will be the next step forward, I think, if these things continue. Police stations have been burnt and attacked. Prisoners have been released. This is not like a riot. This is like a semi-insurrection. Where it's going, we don't know. Muslim Brotherhood offices have also been burnt down as well. There's a lot of animosity towards the Muslim Brotherhood and also towards the Sharia law that they're supposed to be wanting to be on their agenda. People don't want it. I say people don't want Sharia law. Most of these people will call themselves Muslims, but they don't want Sharia law. So this is a situation that's really serious. You've got to realise that Egypt's a really pivotal nation in the Middle East. Although the war in Syria, which I think is going to have great implications, particularly in Turkey, Lebanon, and of course Israel. We don't know where that's going, but we don't. That's basically like a civil war. We're still in a position of insurrection, of revolution in Egypt. Morsi has called it a counter-revolution. Well, it's not a counter-revolution. They don't want to bring Mubarak back. They want to stop a guy from becoming another Mubarak. They don't want to see the same system that they've already got rid of, kind of, reasserting itself with new faces. And they don't want like harsh or any kind of Sharia law. They want freedom. They want what's coming to them. They want a decent standard of living. They don't want the police on their backs. They don't want a secret police. They don't want the threat of the army hanging over them. You know, they want stuff like that. There's workers on strike that haven't been paid. It's interesting. It's going places. You read the history of any revolution, a real revolution, you always get the prisoners liberated, the police stations attacked, and so on. So far, the army haven't intervened, but they are using them to patrol during the curfew times. I can't say what's happened over the last day because there's been no news coming out at all. I would imagine that there has been people, and there still are people out on the streets defying the curfew. The police have been withdrawn to barracks, kind of, so you don't, in these cities, except for Cairo and I think Alexandria, there's still, probably as I speak now, heavy street battles going on. And these are proper street battles with people getting killed and Molotov cocktails being thrown and so on. So right now, the revolution continues. I'd just like to talk about a few things that have arisen over the last week or so. One has been, and it hasn't arisen, it's happened all the time, extreme harassment of women. We don't know who's doing this. I suspect, without any evidence, I suspect that it's probably remnants of the old regime. You often see a lot of people fighting with the police on their side, throwing rocks at people. I think these are the sort of old Mubarak supporters. I mean, maybe it's just men behaving like total fucking pigs. I don't know. But it's a worrying thing when women are harassed, because women are out on the streets as well. And they should feel safe to go to Tahrir Square or anywhere else and to be out on the streets. And of course, there was plenty of women out on the streets at the funerals that were taking place, and the people that have been massacred by the police. So yes, I think this is a worrying thing. It's been going on for quite some time, and I think that people have got to put a stop to it and to give a space so that women can come out onto the streets and keep out on the streets. After all, you can't make a revolution without half of the population. And the women have got a lot of other things as well to be out on the streets about, as well as the political oppression. There's also the social repression that they're subjected to and so on. They've got to go out on the streets and become free. It's not going to be a male-only thing. You make half a revolution, you dig your own grave, as somebody once said, and that's quite true. So we don't want to see any more harassment of women. And we want to see, like, you know, positive moves being taken to end such things. Now, another thing that's emerged has been the Black Bloc. Now, I don't go on the internet, so I can't say whether this is a sort of equivalent of our Black Bloc or whether they're just masking up. But it seems because there's so much tear gas being on this, everybody's masked up anyway, and they have to be masked up to combat the effects of tear gas. Even the most minimal thing you've got to do is to mask up. But these people are actually calling themselves the Black Bloc. They're not being called the Black Bloc, they're calling themselves the Black Bloc. They seem to have emerged again in the major cities of Alexandria, but particularly Cairo. All right, what's their ideology? Well, I don't know what their ideology. Are they anarchists, for example? It is possible that they may be influenced by anarchism. There's certainly no sort of anarchist movement of any great import in Egypt, as far as I know. But then again, what do we really know about any of these countries? You know, there's anarchists everywhere, and quite obvious in this era of mass communication that they are using the internet to communicate, as well as mobiles and tweets and so on. So obviously the idea is it's a sort of global village, if you like. So they would have come in contact with anarchist ideas and anarchist tactics. So I think it probably is a sort of genuine Black Bloc. But where they're going to go politically or not, I don't know. Very interesting to have seen red and black flags appearing, just in a few shots on the BBC News. Is this part of the Black Bloc? We don't know. The only thing I read about the Black Bloc was in the Guardian the other day, where, interestingly enough, again, women were being harassed quite badly, even having items of clothing removed from them by these elements. And apparently the Black Bloc actually formed a contingent, some of them armed with knives, well, it's pretty heavy out of there, to escort the women to safety. This was in the Guardian. That's the only really thing I've read about the Black Bloc. So for the images and what's going on in the background, I'd say that the development of the Black Bloc is probably a good thing. Although the left would probably say there are agent provocateurs and so on. And I think the agent provocateurs are the people that are harassing women. And talking about the left, not that I like to, except to curse the bastards, is that apparently quite a few of them have been going over to Egypt as well. People like trade unions people. Now, what the fucking hell have our lick-spittle trade unions got to teach people out there that are in the streets burning down police stations is beyond my fucking comprehension. What are they going to tell them, don't do this, it will alienate, the Labour voters or something. They've got nothing to tell the people from Egypt. The people from Egypt are making and running. Our lot are just a load of useless donkeys and cabbages. They're never going to accomplish anything, and their only agenda is getting Labour back in the power. But also people like Claire Solomons. I mean, who the fucking hell is she to go over to Egypt and sort of have any import at all? I mean, she don't even know what's fucking going on over here. She don't even know what's going on sort of 2 or 3 doors away from her. She's got no idea about. She's a lefty. I've met her before. She's a total fucking idiot. Just someone that's in the media, someone that changes our identity once every 6 months. She'll probably be a Tory MP in about 5 years' time. So these people going over, I say to the Egyptian people, if these people come over from England with their so-called credentials, just tell them to fuck off, go back to England and make a fucking revolution there, because that is the only thing that they should be doing, but they'll never do that because they'll never be a part of any revolution over here, and they'll never be a part of any revolution anywhere else, despite their poses. So there's a few things I'd like to say about Egypt. I'd like to say I don't know much about the country. I've been there years ago, and I have. Whenever you go to a country, you should really take an interest in it and read books about it. And I have read a bit about Egypt, and I've known Egyptian people and so on. So, and I have been very interested in what's happened in Egypt, even right back to the 70s when they had the bread riots and the military police uprising, which was very spontaneous, was not anything to do with the Muslim Brotherhood or Islamic extremists. The military police, and the people that were guarding the buildings, were all conscripts. And I'd say, who are these guys? Oh, they're the military police. They're conscripted, standing for 12 hours outside a building, for like a few pence a day pay, conscripted. And in the end, they got fed up with the brutality meted out of them by their superiors, the sort of completely useless work that they had to do, and they mutinied, and they burnt down hotels, and they went for it. But it got confused with an Islamic uprising, but it wasn't. It was, That's the other thing as well. Talk about the army there. Now, the army have kind of stepped back. They haven't really intervened yet. If the police, this could be one of the scenarios for the future, so there's a bit of speculation for you. If the police are defeated on the streets, which it looks like they are being defeated, they can't win, and they are having their police stations burnt down, they are taking casualties and so on, and more people coming out and fighting them. What then? Well, when did the army yesterday was saying, the state is in shows signs of disintegration, which a lot of people will say, well, fucking good as well, because what is the state in Egypt? It's a state of nepotism, corruption and so on. It doesn't bring anything for the people. The Muslim Brotherhood are the people that run a lot of schools and clinics and so on. So that is why they got so many votes. That is why they are in a position of strength. But against the wrath of the people, they don't seem to be strong at all. What's Morsi going to do? Is he going to bring out the army, which could lead to, well, completely unforeseen circumstances and really take the revolution to a third phase? Or is he going to rely on the police? I don't think that I don't think that they're doing their job for him. They can't. They've been defeated or in the process of defeat. So will he in fact get his supporters out onto the streets and rally them in some sort of militia or something, or get them to support the police? Again, it could be a very bad tactic. It might backfire on him. So everything in Egypt is completely up for grabs. And I think that basically is the people that are in revolt against Morsi have got no demands to make. They don't say, we want to sit. Even the opposition, another bunch of politicians don't want to sit down with him. I mean, at least they've caught the mood. So yes, the revolution continues. And as I say, Egypt is a very pivotal part of the Arabic world. Wherever the Arabic language is spoken, Egypt is very important, and geographically it's very important. It has the highest population of Arabic speakers, and it has a really amazing history over the last 150 years. I don't know much about it, I'll say, but try reading about it. It's absolutely fascinating, and it's a really fascinating society. I hope to go over there again when it kind of calms down and go as a tourist and not as a fucking pseudo-revolutionary tourist like the likes of Claire Solomon and so on. So anyway, I'm beginning to repeat myself again. And I really haven't said anything, have I? I haven't given any indication of what could happen in the future. Because I don't know, and I don't think anybody else knows either. And I think all these sort of self-proclaimed experts, they know no more than what I do, and probably what you do. So keep following the situation in Egypt anyway. As I say, it's got ramifications that will have an impact here, particularly when we're out on the streets, hopefully in the not too distant future. Talking about being on the streets, there is one other thing I'd like to come back to as well. Remember I've said about how loathsome the EDL are, and we don't want them around Whitechapel and so on, and that they were coming to protect us from Sharia law. And I've said that there is no Sharia law in Whitechapel. Go back to my previous broadcast, I don't go back on that at all. But there are people that would like to have Sharia law. And there are a few morons, and these were total fucking moron wasters, that have been out on the streets with Sharia law patrols, insulting gay people, confiscating alcohol from people, and generally making a total nuisance of themselves around my area. I haven't personally seen them myself, but I do know somebody that's been confronted by them. They were told that they were wearing immodest dress and that they shouldn't be drinking and so on. And she just told them, as anybody else would, to fuck off. And so did a lot of other people around as well. These people have got no influence. Just a bunch of nutters. And I'll tell you what people think about them around Whitechapel if you really want to know. I don't know anybody that wants them around. So you have a look at the Muslims. They don't want them around because they're giving, they're giving people a bad name. They're giving the area a bad name. They're giving them a bad name. They're not involved in any of these Sharia law patrols. It's people, again, that have come from the outside. So, yeah, I told the Egyptians to tell the lights of Claire something to fuck off back to her own country. And we're telling the people from the Sharia law patrols to fuck off back to where they come from. Or maybe, why don't they go and fight in Syria, or some Mali? Why haven't they got the fucking bottle? They just want to make arseholes of themselves around the streets of Whitechapel. I'll tell you why we really don't want them around, because they're bringing the fucking police around as well. We've got enough trouble with gangs and so on. We don't want another gang or a pseudo gang out on the streets. And they've been in an area where there isn't too much gang problems. So we don't want them around. Nobody wants them around. The gangs don't want them around either because they bring the police around. The people from the mosque don't want them around. They are, even though the Whitechapel Mosque is really sort of conservative with Saudi Arabian money coming in and so on, even they don't want them around. We never wanted them around anyway when they were giving out their literature outside the mosque, and they've told them they're not welcome there. And now they've made it very clear, as we all make it very clear to these Sharia law nutters, right, that we don't want you around the area, we don't want to see you around in the streets, and you're probably quite lucky that the police have picked you up. Because if the police hadn't picked you up, then someone would have probably have given you a kicking, probably one of the gangs or something, right? So yeah, say no to Sharia law in Egypt and no to Sharia law in Whitechapel. Sharia law people in Whitechapel, you're just as loathsome and just as creepy and just as unwelcome as the EDL are. So there, bye.